Hi, it's Dave with Beyond Guitars. Glad to be back with you again. And we're in the final stages of Mike's dad's Gibson banjo neck. And we're going to do some final polishing on it today. So a short video coming right up after this. Well, here it is, and this is after the last final wet coat. It's been a couple weeks now, and the finish is nice and hard. And I'll tell you, because I took all the precautions I did in my last video, you saw how I did the double coats, and then I would sand it smooth in between the coats to get it nice and flat, and then go ahead with the next coat. And we've got about 10 coats of lacquer on it now. I digress. Going back here, because I did all of that, I have very little to do at this point. So it is already really shiny, as you can tell, and it has exceeded my expectations. So I'm really happy with it. So I've got a little bit of polishing to do, and some people, of course, would not do the polishing, and you don't have to, but I'm going to give it a little bit of a polish. Now, because it is in good shape now, I don't have a lot of grades of sandpaper to go through, but the polishing process involves sanding. A lot of people don't understand that, but this is where the automotive paint store comes in for me. You can get sandpaper online that meets my what I would need to do this, but you can see I've got it soaking already. I've had this soaking now for quite some time, and I've got different grades in here. I've got 2000 here, and that's what I'm going to be using today. I've been using 400 between coats, and I'm all done with that, so we'll let my sandpaper dry out again eventually. But right now, I've got this 2000. It's nice and flexible because it has been soaking in the water now for quite a while, actually a couple of days. So really, to begin, all I have to do is just give it a light sand like I did between the coats. And if this were an old finish that was rough or a spray job that didn't go so well, then you would want to start with lower grades of sandpaper and work your way up. I would start with perhaps the 400, and this is just kind of hypothetical. Then I would move on up to 600, and then 1,000 and 1,500. I'm going to skip all of those because it looks so good. So one thing I do want to emphasize is edges like this you want to stay away from. You don't want to even touch them because then you'll go through the finish really fast. Areas like this where it bulges out, I've warned about this before. That's a high spot where the fifth string tuner goes, and that's very prone to being worn through. High spots like on the edges of the volute and around the edges of the headstock too, all the way around the volute and the edges and the front of the headstock as well. So everywhere you see an edge, I would stay away from. You don't really need to polish it all, so just stay out of trouble. You know, don't go near them. But with the 2000 grit sandpaper, that's normally where I end. Now, some people, when they're polishing, will go beyond 2000. They'll go on up to 3000. And that's fine, but at that point then, at the end of the 2000, I will do some polishing and get the high-grade polish that I'm after. Now again, I'm just going to do this freehand, no sanding blocks. Those will tend to put pressure on the high spots, so I don't want to put pressure on any spot in particular. I just want to get the roughness, and it's a microscopic roughness. I mean, you can't really even see it, but there is some irregularity to the surface, so I want to get that as much down smooth as I can. And all I have on this is water, and I just keep it well hydrated as I go. Now, some questions might be, is the water going to harm the wood? No, the water's not going to harm the wood. It's already protected by lacquer, and so the lacquer is all I'm sanding. I'm not even sanding wood. You can sand in any direction you want, because you're not touching wood grain. We're not sanding wood grain. We're sanding basically a plastic surface. So it doesn't really matter what direction you go. Just as I say, avoid sanding too much on high spots like this. You might want to touch them a little bit, but just use very, very light pressure and stay there as little as you can. However, on edges like the volute and around the headstock, I would stay away from them entirely. Don't sand that at all. So just a light sanding really is all we need. And I can take another quick, close look at it. We've got a little more roughness here on the edges of the, on the sides of the headstock. It didn't come out quite as glassy smooth, but easy to smooth that down. Stay away from spots like that, or you'll end up with bare wood, and you don't want to see that at this point. We're already done here with the work, so we're not going to go backwards, all right? This sandpaper is so fine, it doesn't feel really hardly like sandpaper, but you know, if you rubbed it with your fingers long enough, you'd feel it. It will cut away material, and you can even see it when it dries that it's kind of turning my water here kind of milky from the finish that's suspended in it as I continue to sand at it. We have enough lacquer on this now with 10 coats. I'm not afraid I'm going to go through it with such a fine grade sandpaper unless I were to ride up on the edges, and that's something you just want to stay away from. So I think we're looking pretty good. Could use a little more sanding there. Having the light above me and behind the camera here is beneficial. I can move it around and I can see the shine, and where it shines in my eye is a different angle than the camera right now, but occasionally the camera will get a shine on it like that. And when you see that, you can really see the texture of the surface better, especially where it's black, because it doesn't reflect much. I'm relying on the surface to reflect the light, and that's how I can tell what the surface condition is. And I can see that all along here. I'm making it nice and smooth. So really the sandpaper is to smooth out the bumps, just as it was between coats. But this is not going to get another coat of lacquer. We're done with the lacquer. The heel always kind of confounds me a little bit because it's such a compound curve. You can sand it down the sides like this, you can sand it up the heel like that. I kind of actually do both, staying away from that edge. And then you can kind of go around it this direction. Now there's no wood grain in this spot either. Even when I'm in the bare wood stages, I'm a little unsure which way to go, because at this point you've just got end grain with the wood grain going this way, and this is cut away at such an angle that really this is just end grain. So there's no real way to follow the grain. And if you ask me, it doesn't really much matter which way you go. Like I mentioned, if you're standing on the North Pole, every direction is south. So we don't have a real direction to go other than just start moving. Anyway, that's about it. You know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time polishing. And the nice thing about having this fine paper is if you do goof up, and I did bump that edge a little bit, it takes off so little that if you don't repeat your mistake, then you're probably not going to have a bad result from it. And the last thing we could do with this banjo is give it some wax over the surface. I can really see that polishing out. Did have a little roughness on that edge still. So feeling really nice and smooth now at this point. And that's where I'm going to call it. And we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, so enough of the sanding. And we're going to take another look at it when it's dry, because that will give you another perspective of what the surface is like when the water is off and it's not reflecting. Then I can see, you know, it's a nice satin finish right now with the sanding done. And I found that you can make a satin finish out of a glossy finish with a 4/0 steel wool. And like I've said before, steel wool won't polish, it will roughen, but a satin finish has a little bit of a roughness to it. and that's how we get it. But it's looking pretty nice, like a satin finish right now. But that's not what we're after. So I'm going to move on to the polishing stages. A little water on it won't hurt. The product I use, I've tried a few things, and this is what I'm using. This is an automotive paint polish. They call it Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. Some people don't like this stuff. I've found that I get the best shine with it, so I'm not endorsing it. You can try it. I would personally recommend it. Some people wouldn't, but it has a very, very fine polishing compound in it. And I found that these microfiber cloths work pretty well. The ultimate smoothness is from an old diaper, one that's been laundered. And I've actually gone to Walmart to buy cloth diapers. I don't have a baby anymore. My baby's about to have a baby. But in any case, either microfiber will work, or when I'm through with this stage, I may move on to a diaper if it still doesn't have the shine I want. And you know, the little nozzle on this bottle tends to get a little clogged up, so I just took it off. And I'll just spread some on. It doesn't matter exactly how you spread it on. It's just there for you to work it in. So it's available to me now because it's all over the thing. And now I can start polishing. And I polish by hand. I don't use a machine. And I just start polishing the heck out of it like you would a shoe or waxing a car or anything. Now you're down to a very fine grade of abrasive here. This is so fine that it's not really going to go through the edges. I don't like to ride on edges ever, but as you go finer and finer, you have less and less danger of having a major accident. So I may want a little more compound on it, and we'll get the old elbow grease is what really does it. It just takes work. You've got to really put some pressure on it. I don't like using a power tool because I'm afraid of hitting the edge and burning it. You can burn the lacquer with friction if you are not careful. So I consider the neck such a small piece that I don't mind getting a little exercise out of it. It's better for me to do it this way than to risk a disaster using a machine. So I've got a little bit more polishing to do. I can still see some of the streaks from my sandpaper in there, so that just means I have more to do. Okay, so I am going to advance past this. I can see from the headstock I've got a very nice shine on it, but I don't have the tiniest scratches out, and I think that the diaper will do better with the last stages. So I just do more of the same all over the whole neck, and you just polish it out vigorously with the ultimate compound, and I tell you, you'll get a shine. There's no question about it. This doesn't really take that long because the neck is so small. You know, I have done some automotive work like this too, where you're polishing the paint, and you need a buffer because it's just too much area. You would just die. Your arms would fall off. So big jobs, definitely a machine. Little jobs, and the lacquer is not as durable as a polyurethane paint on a car. So you do need to be especially careful not to burn it, not to melt it, and not to wear through it. Those are the things. I mean, if you're using a machine that's spinning and you come up on an edge with that disc and it rolls up onto this edge, the edge is going to get worn away, or it's going to develop so much heat in friction that it will actually burn the paint or the lacquer, whatever it is you've got on it. It'll burn it, and then it's unrecoverable. You'd have to apply new finish to it because it's burnt, and that's something you don't ever want to do. And I learned from a professional polishing guy, he's a detail guy, but he really did a lot of polishing, hours and hours. But I'd ask him a lot of questions years ago, and his biggest warning to me was about burning. And you know what? I've never burned paint polishing. I guess because I fear it so much. But it's nice to know about it, because if you don't know, you're going to end up doing it. You know, I think that this is the thing I've run into with microfiber cloths. They're not soft enough. I can get down to a certain point, but then if I really want that ultra shine, I can't use this stuff because it doesn't bring me to that high level. My polishing compound will. I have complete faith in that because I've done it before and I know it works. So I'm going to switch over to the cloth, the diaper, the cotton, soft cotton. You can use an old t-shirt too, as long as it's 100% cotton. You don't want poly in it, polyester or anything. So I'm going to do away with the microfiber, and in comes the cotton diaper. Okay, so I mentioned how you can use an old t-shirt. I've got an old t-shirt here. It's very, very soft. It's much softer than synthetic fibers. They're just never as soft as cotton. Never. People nowadays, they rely on microfiber for everything, but it is not the best at polishing a high gloss. It just won't do it. Yeah, now see, I'm getting a luster here that I cannot get with the microfiber. If I were to use a machine on this, it wouldn't be hand-rubbed lacquer. Now the other thing is that because this finish isn't 2 months old, it's still pretty fresh, and it takes quite a while for it to fully cure. So you might say I'm jumping the gun a little, but I'm aware the finish is a little bit, well, it's not as hard as it's going to end up. I won't call it soft, but it's not as resistant to scratching as it will be in the future, here in another month or so. But boy, I'm getting a good shine there. That's always good to see. Areas that are particularly hard to rub out are the heel and around the headstock. And you don't have to do this on a table. You could do it while you're sitting and watching TV if people don't mind you handling this stuff in your living room. You can just pay attention to what you're doing and keep polishing it wherever you are. Sometimes I've put it in my lap and just polish it. I'm kind of bracing it between my knees or whatever. You can see that luster, at least I can. Here, let's take a look at this headstock as I polish it. You can still see some of those little scratches in it, but I'm going to put a little more compound on it. Well, this is about all there is to it. It does take some time and effort and some elbow grease, but my tips really mainly are, when you're polishing, is stay away from the edges. Try not to use a machine, especially on lacquer. It just will melt and burn quicker than you can imagine if you're using a buffing machine, especially if the lacquer is kind of fresh like this. It's just not as hard as it's going to be in the next couple of months, actually. But yeah, we're getting a good shine out of it, so that's really all I care about right now. We'll let it age for a little while longer, and then we can go ahead and level the frets. The other tip I want to give you is, as I demonstrated here, the microfiber cloth. You know, everybody loves microfiber and it is great, but it just doesn't give the final ultimate shine, and you really need to use soft cotton. There's no replacement for soft cotton. An old t-shirt or a worn out diaper, or even a new one that you've washed a couple of times, that's what I've got. I just found the t-shirt first and that worked fine. So we're all done here. That's all there is to it. It takes time and effort and all that, but you can see what the result is. It's quite nice, I think. I love doing lacquer. It's my favorite finish to use, and even though it is really labor intensive, but don't be afraid of it. It's really not going to bite you as long as you just take care with certain things. And so I'm giving it a little final rub out here, but for the most part, we are finished here, and the next time we get together, we're going to be putting this banjo together. Well, that's going to wrap it up today. I'm glad you could join me for the polishing segment, which was a little short because I took so much time and effort to sand between coats and get it nice and shiny, and to get that nice wet flow out of my lacquer when I was spraying it. So that all paid off today. So I'm very happy. It has exceeded my expectations. And so we don't have much left to do here. That's it for today, but in the next video, I will be assembling this banjo and doing the setup. And then we'll check that head with the drum dial and do all of that. I've got the pot already done, you know. So that's going to go together, and Mike wants to sell it, so we'll talk about all that. Be sure to join me for the next one, so like and subscribe and drop me a comment if you would, and join me next time here at Beyond Guitars.